JB Knowledge Podcast Network. On episode 73 of the InsureTech Geek Podcast, talking about sponsored startups with Bill Martin from Plymouth Rock Assurance. The InsureTech Geek Podcast, powered by JB Knowledge, is all about technology that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. We'll be interviewing guests and doing deep dives into specific tech we see changing the industry. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech, so enjoy the ride and geek out. Oh, yeah. As we record this, it is Friday, December the 17th, 2021. It's the last episode of the year. We're going to take a couple weeks off for Christmas and New Year's, but it has been a heck of a year. With me today, I've got, of course, my illustrious co-host, the most interesting man in insurance, endofinsurance.com. That's Mr. Rob Galbraith. Rob, how's it going, buddy?
It's going, James. I'm really looking forward to just some time down with family and relaxing during these holidays. We actually didn't go on a family vacation this year. We were talking with producer Jim Greenlee right before we started recording that our Texas winter storm kind of ended up being our family vacation for the year. So I have a couple of my kids are traveling over the holidays. Not everyone's going, but it should be nice. It should be nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're going to be, of course, up in Michigan, hanging out, enjoy a little actual winter. We get in Texas as a bit of a fake winter. It's although we got two severe ice and snow snaps in 2021. We are not we're not immune from super cold weather, but we don't get the fun powdery stuff that you can actually ski on. So I'll be doing that. I'm looking forward to that. And of course, with us, our guest, Mr. Bill Martin. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Good to see you.
Bill, where are you joining us from?
I'm in Boston, Massachusetts.
I was just in Boston a few weeks ago. Had a great time. Went to my first Bruins game. I lived in Boston summer of 2000. Had a great time there, but never went to a Bruins game. I will say, extremely entertaining, Bill.
Summer is a great place to be in Boston. So
yeah,
now I'm being reminded of my Michigan winters here. It's the first time I've been back in the north since I moved out of Michigan.
Yeah,
30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Oh yeah. Michigan's a little different. A lot of lake effect snow in Southwest Michigan, and we get several feet dumped on us. It's of course immensely entertaining when you don't have to live with it for 5 months.
It's way more fun on demand.
Yeah, it's fun when it's like 2 weeks. Then you're like, okay, time to get out of here.
All done.
Yeah, exactly. All done. All done with that. So you're in Boston. Love me some Boston. With Plymouth Rock Assurance. And glad to have you on. We're gonna talk about all kinds of stuff today, but also sponsored startups. Before we get started with that discussion, don't forget that you can subscribe to the InsureTech Geek Podcast by texting Geek Out. That's GEEKOUT, Geek Out, to 66866. Make sure you never miss an episode. Back to our guest, Bill Martin, President and CEO at Plymouth Rock Assurance. For those of you who like to follow along during the interview, that is at PlymouthRock.com. Hell of a job getting a good domain name, by the way. I'm sure there might have been a little bit of competition for that one, considering how prominent Plymouth Rock weighs on the American history mindset.
Pilgrims were here first, but we were first on the internet. So
there you go. There you go. I actually descend from some folks who landed there. So
nice.
I'm a 12th generation U.S. American. My 11th great-grandfather, whatever number you assign to that, John Benham, landed over there in Plymouth in 1631. So I'm what you call old school Massachusetts.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're way old school.
Way old school.
400 years exactly.
Almost 400 years. And so always good to chat. So tell me before we get into the business, because we're going to talk about Plymouth Rock, we're talking about sponsored startups, we're going to talk about a lot of things. Let's talk about you for a second. Where were you born and raised, and kind of what did you envision doing with your career when you were a kid?
Well, I was born in Huntington Beach, California, but I left before they plowed all the bean fields over, so I was very young and moved east. I grew up in Michigan, in Michigan, just south of Flint, a town called Fenton, pretty much a factory town. People that worked 3 shifts, you knew whose yard you didn't play in, who was on the graveyard shift, and that sort of thing. I went to school back in the West, sight unseen, to Stanford, and really planned to make my way to grad school, like 98% of the people who go there do. But before I did, I got stolen away. I wanted to take a break, and I got stolen away by a Progressive. Progressive had just in that day decided to take its Cleveland operations and spread it out into the five different sections, and they were about 300 million in size, and they were doing something that we all aspire to do in the InsureTech geek world, which is change the business, completely re-engineer and change the business, and so they shipped us, me and three others, from school to Sacramento, Rancho Cordova, where they had a regional office, and started work there. They put me into product management within a few months, and that was when product management first started. It's kind of interesting to see how that's evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was no such thing as a product manager back in the
No,
day.
and I there could be some debate whether the tech world, which came later, stole it from the insurance world, which we stole. Frankly, Peter Lewis, the chairman at the time, had stolen it from Procter and Gamble, the brand management idea, where you take somebody who knows nothing about the business, but you give them all the authority with no employees, and they go tell everybody what to do. And that kind of drifted to expertise in pricing. But the truth is, we were just trying to be disruptive. We were trying to be little mini tech CEOs of the day.
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting ride for you beyond even that, because you made a few stops: Travelers Insurance, Agency Insurance Company of Maryland, AFG, then North Point Company Insurance Company, Farmers Insurance Group for 9 years, Bankers Insurance, Bunker Hill Insurance Company. I mean, so what was the path there? I mean, where did you spent time as a pricing officer, at COO, vice president? What was your path career wise through the insurance
Well,
world?
there was both the personal and professional, but there's more of a pattern than it looks like. Progressive kept moving me east, and I wanted to go back to California. I was kind of in love with the place, and eventually, Travelers said, "Hey, if you move to Hartford for a year or two, we'll move you back west." I moved to Hartford. Prop 103 passed. We pulled out of California. I wasn't going back west. So I went to a startup, and the startup was Agency Insurance Company in Maryland. It was a guy in premium finance who had enough money to start an insurance company, wanted somebody who knew what they were doing. And at 23-year-old, I knew everything. So I started an insurance company for him, hired his son. They brought in an adult eventually, and I moved on to American Financial Group, where they wanted to start a non-standard auto insurance company. So I did a sponsored startup for Agency Services, which became Agency Insurance Company, and a sponsored startup for the Transport Insurance Group, which became Tico Leader Insurance. And then eventually somebody let me do my own startup in Sacramento. That one was mostly sponsored by reinsurers, which many of your InsureTech startups start with before they go and raise money in the home insurance business. At that time, I was starting a non-standard auto insurance company, did it in Sacramento again, Roseville. Reinsurance dried up after 9/11, so I fired myself and got recruited by an ex-Progressive guy at Farmers named Stephen Lehman, one of the divisional managers when I first started there. It turned out that somebody who's got experience working for themselves and doing startups is really pretty valuable at a large organization, because you have the audacity to look into every part of the business and to worry about the bottom line rather than just stay in your silo. And that becomes pretty well appreciated, especially if you come up with good ideas about how to get them out of the quagmire that inevitably every large insurance company is in each one of their product lines. So that was a very successful run. I got to eventually ran their auto business, which was $8 billion. And we acquired a couple companies, Bristol West and AIG Auto, and eventually went into marketing so I could help integrate those companies into Farmers. Got to be involved with the creation of the campaign you still see today, the J.K. Simmons Professor campaign. So got to learn the value of marketing in the business, just as everybody else began to spend a ridiculous amount on marketing.
You mean my favorite song, "We Are Farmers"? Bum ba-dum bum 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 bum.
Very good. When Timberlake sang that on the Oscars stage, there were hundreds of us around the nation who were involved with creating it, just jumping up and down, going, "I can't believe it!" Anyway, so that was all good. But eventually, at Farmers, I was a senior vice president when I left. I began to get offers to run companies, and I picked one in Florida because I had an idea for home insurance that people weren't brave enough to try in a large organization. It was it's too disruptive to the existing competitive advantage and risky. No, you risk something in home insurance in Florida and you get the reinsurance right, so you're ready for the hurricane, you can still make a lot of money. And I would argue that most of the successful companies in Florida are because of, they're going to hate me for this, or because they haven't had a hurricane that ruined their performance on the non-cat, that revealed that they really weren't that good at insurance pricing on the non-cat side, non-catastrophe side. So the idea was that because the majority of risk in home insurance is related to location, size of home, things you could correlate with the ownership and whether, that you didn't really need to ask all the questions we were asking. And that was 2011. I want to emphasize the fact that was 2011 because there's at least 30 companies since 2011 who claim they've invented this. And I won't claim that I was the inventor, but I was probably one of the first to execute on it at Bankers Insurance in Florida. Worked very well, worked better than me or the ownership family thought it would. I made a lot of money. And I realized that I had something that should be national. And eventually that a lot of other stories brought me to Plymouth Rock, where they kind of embraced the innovation and would fund the innovation and give me a platform where I wasn't worrying about, who's printing the paychecks and what the scent in the bathroom is. And I was worrying about what we're bringing to the market, what we were going to sell that somebody would want to buy. I think a lot of people who run startups think that the important things are things like who prints the paychecks and what building they're in and whether there's a pool table in the other room. It's like, no, really what's important is what did you build something that the consumer actually wants to buy? And until you do that, you haven't really started anything.
Well, but before we jump into Rob's question for you, I want to hear your definition of sponsored startup, because that could mean to our listeners, it could mean a few things to a few different people. So walk me through because you've said that phrase a few times. It's obviously the title of the show. Walk me through what you mean by sponsored startup.
Well, so you have to be picky, right? I mean, it means that there's another company, one single company that's funding the portion, the business. And in ideally, they're also making available to you the resources that they already provide to their existing businesses that you choose to use. I mean, if they aren't giving you the option to choose it or not choose it, then it's not really a startup.
No, it's just a division.
Right? That's right. In my case, I chose to use a brand name of two very large auto insurance organizations, a direct and an independent agency one, because I could sell into those two books of business much more quickly with the brand name. So I chose the brand name. I've chosen what I would call infrastructure departments like legal and HR and finance. I eventually bring people on once I have full-time work for them. But there are things that large companies will buy that startups don't buy. Because they shouldn't buy anyway, because they should try to make money early. And so they have to have the option not to buy it.
Yeah. Gotcha. And I think that's really important is the attachment strings have to be pretty loose for you to consider it a sponsored startup and not a division of a company, right? That's right. You have to have autonomy or it's just another subset. Even if you create a separate legal entity, if you own 100% of it, they're required to continue running everything by the marketing department of the parent company, and you can't actually conduct the experiment, then it's not exactly the same thing. So
it's interesting because I think in most large organizations, the managers have done well, want to get in there and make sure you don't do something wrong, and they take some pride in reducing risk for the larger organization. When actually a startup needs to do the exact opposite. It needs to take a risk that the larger organization wouldn't take on its own. Otherwise, you might as well just do it within the operation. So there's friction there, but this company, very well run by its founder, Jim Stone, and its president, Hal Beladoff at the parent companies, really allowed me to be a CEO and president of an independent company and to do things, that aren't ridiculous, but that are reasonable risks and really kind of in some cases a little bit unreasonable. So I remember one time I was telling Jim Stone on the board meeting, I was saying, hey, I want to name my claims VP customer benefits VP. Now somebody's going to steal that idea, so now that I have it out there. He says, okay, and I'll name you the president of wacky names. And I said, all right, you're right, that's not important. Let's just go do the job, right? Let's go work on the really important things that we're going to be weird about, right? Like like never asking anything more than your address, like trying to make money without using credit when everybody knows credit gives lift to every other single variable. Like having tiered commissions in spite of a high dependency on high commissions of your biggest channel, of trying to create APIs that attach to any interface with an address. All these things that nobody's trying because it involves risk that underwriting underwrites out, and you do it in the name of a customer experience.
Rob?
Bill, so you've put a lot out there that are great that I definitely want to dive into in terms of your innovation at Plymouth Rock Assurance and what you're doing. So lots of breadcrumbs there. But before we dive into the specifics of how you're innovating, I want to stay with this theme of innovation from within a larger corporate environment. And you've seen it on both sides now. You've done it within traditional companies. You mentioned Progressive, which is definitely one that I admire. And we were talking prior to recording about, I know for many years when I was at USA, we were going through all the Progressive filings and trying to understand how they were calculating certain rates and how they were handling certain types of expenses. And we adapted the product management model, which we had never had. And so there's a lot of blatant ripping off, which is actually probably the sincerest form of innovation. Flattery, right? Is that, your competitors now ripping off what you're doing. But it's so hard. And this is probably the theme I talk to the most organizations about, I've taught classes about, and even I feel like I don't have all the answers. I can tell you a lot of ways that didn't work, but the sponsored startup concept, what's the difference between a pure startup and some of the challenges there? And then what are some of the advantages and disadvantages, and how do you, I don't know if there's some maybe wisdoms that you can share that you've discovered about creating a successful sponsored startup?
Yeah, it's a good question because there is no two sponsors that are going to allow you the same freedom or degrees of freedom. But the biggest difference is one thing that I mentioned earlier, which is you're working on infrastructure things as a de novo startup, whereas on the sponsored startup, hopefully you're working on the value proposition. And the value proposition will be the ultimate determinant of success at the end of the day, not the which payroll vendor you use. So, or which what the stock purchase agreement says. There's a lot. The second thing is really pretty big, and that is the need to raise money in a de novo startup, because even if you are successfully generating a profit, there's some level of expansion that could benefit from spending. Now, that having been said, one of my startups between Bankers and Plymouth Rock was a company called Neptune. And since we were bootstrapping that one, Jim Albert and I, we decided that we needed to be capital light, as you heard people talk about before, which basically means you're an agent, because in insurance world, you need capital. You have to have capital to back the risk that you take. But in the agent world, you market and get a return on the marketing dollar. And I'm not saying capital isn't used there, but Neptune turned a profit very early and has been very profitable since. It's growing faster than many of the insurtechs out there, and it's making money. So if the multiples for the money losers that are growing at the same pace is as high as it is, then I can't imagine what Neptune is.
Oh, no. That's not how it works.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you lose money, you're worth more money than if you make money.
I knew I had it wrong.
You didn't know?
I had it
You
wrong.
didn't know that? That was
Yeah,
actually
just like
that was actually originated at Stanford, because it's it's right there in Silicon Valley. If you lose money, it's worth more money. If you're making money, something must be wrong with you. Like you must not be spending enough on growth, and so you must be worth less.
36 years, and I haven't got it till now. I'm just an idiot. I gotta go lose some money. I really do.
You have to go lose
I'm
money
making a
if
big
you want.
mistake.
If you want to sell for a ridiculous, insane amount of money, you must be losing money.
Well, and the reward is to an R&D invention. So that's not different anywhere. If you can invent a value prop that a customer wants to buy, then you deserve to make money. I don't know why people are shy about that, why they go around and say, hey, I'm going to take cost out of the system, then they never do it. In fact, cost is one of the big limiters to some of these insurtechs making money, not lost cost, but actual expense. And it's because it's hard to bring customers on. So customers will come to a good product, but you do need distribution. And there is no great insurance story that isn't a distribution story.
And I think that's a really salient comment. Right.
That's the
If you,
biggest advantage to a sponsored startup is they usually bring some distribution to you.
yeah,
And so to have a product to give them, all of a sudden there's exponential benefit. Every time I introduce something new at Farmers with 14,000 exclusive agents who didn't sell
yeah,
a competing product, they could sell anything to them. They could sell, if they didn't have ice in Alaska, they would sell ice in Alaska. So I think
yeah.
I would give them ice to sell. So they were fantastic people at describing what their value is as an agent, as well as what the product value was, and thus they could achieve higher prices than their competitors on
Yeah.
the same amount of risk. You just had to give them a good product to do it with.
Yeah, and that's always the challenge in any industry. Let's get outside the insurance industry. If you've got a distribution channel, whether it's your own whole, captive distribution channel, or you're going through resellers, value-added resellers, or agents, whatever you want to define, non wholly owned distribution. If you align commission structures, payments, and you're selling to a similar buyer persona, then you can really juice that distribution model. Where I've seen it fall down in insurance and outside of insurance is when you introduce and you say, well, I already have this distribution channel. They can sell ice, in Alaska. But I mean, it depends. Like if they're already talking to buyers of ice, right? So you've got to make sure that they're not having to completely upend who they sell to and how they sell it, and completely transform that because it can be really challenging.
Don't underestimate the distribution math. I don't think it's just commission. It's also, they do the math too. If they can do 5 times as much business with half the expense,
Yep.
So what you can really get out of somebody. So everybody kept telling me, hey, Bill, you've got this, you give me an address, I got a quote system, right? That's really easy. It sounds like a direct business. And I kept saying to him, why do you think agents don't need it to be easy? They're spending 90% of the time in the home insurance transaction asking questions to get whether they're eligible and what the right rate is. If I eliminate all that, they're going to actually talk about coverage. They're going to say, do you really want a hurricane deductible? You want to buy up? Do you really want
Flood.
that amount of coverage? You want more?
Yeah.
Do you have cyber protection? Do you need more? Like, they can sell the coverage and stop talking about how much linoleum's on the floor or whether the roof was replaced before they even bought the house. They don't know. They just don't know these things. So we need to do our homework to enable the agent to do their job, which isn't setting a rate. Any agent who thinks that their job is to get the customer the lowest rate is probably not as profitable as the one who thinks it's to get the customer the right coverage. If they get the customer the right coverage, they'll make a lot more money. Because these guys will leave when there's a claim, or somebody will just match the price. Price is not a competitive advantage. Anybody can match your price. They might not have the infrastructure to support it, but they can match your price.
Yeah, and then they can, of course, shortchange you on the insurance contract, and then
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, it gets pretty dicey once it's actually bound, and like you just said, when they actually have to experience the claims experience at a bottom rate provider, and they get denied, or it's a rough valuation, or whatever happens there, it gets pretty dicey. Before we go into Rob's next question, I'm just curious. What's the big competitive advantage you have at Plymouth Rock? Like what have you done there that really you think sets you apart?
The risk of giving away the secret sauce, it's the fact that we know what we want to charge before we meet the customer. And so we can go further with that and say, can we estimate what the competitors are going to charge? Yes. Can we estimate their likelihood to respond to my marketing? Yes. And if the stars align, you know exactly what your target is. It's who you can offer a better rate, who you can make money on, and who will respond to your marketing. And you won't waste marketing dollars. You won't have spillage of marketing dollars by doing it by demographic or general media. Everybody will tell you those things are useful for increasing people's consideration for your brand name. But I work through many different channels, not my own brand name necessarily. And so, where I'm more concerned with whether I can finitely target that market and become an option and a consideration for that target market only. I don't care if the guys who I can't give a lower rate or who I can't compete on, who aren't profitable, come with me. They can stay where they're at.
Gotcha. Excellent. Thank you, Rob.
So, Bill, you've talked a little bit about some of the innovations, and particularly this idea of, you enter your address, you get a quote, and you don't have to ask all those questions. And maybe you can unwind a little bit, right? What enables you to do that? I'm going to presume that there's a fair bit of third-party data. There may be some API integration there. So, what are some of the key technologies that has allowed you to make some of these innovations? And then, how do you see some of the buzz technologies and anything else you might want to mention. So I think of IoT, I think of things like aerial imagery, right? AI and machine learning. So what are some of the technologies that you're using today, or that may be on your radar that you think could really make a big impact on homeowners insurance?
So every this is one of the huge benefits of being in Boston. Every day, there is a new advance in predictive analytics. And as you heard over time, there's an exponential change in the amount of data available to you. And if my data science group grows as quickly as the opportunities do, it's going to take over the rest of the organization very soon. Because the truth is, the traditional modeling and insurance, and even the state of the art modeling, I think everybody's gotten to machine learning now, um, is being obsoleted quickly. And so this analytical tech is becoming just a lot of fun to watch. Homeowners insurance, we used to use generalized linear models to set auto insurance rates, and we're thinking we were state of the art. Well, it turns out homeowners insurance is anything but linear. There might be some curve to where the risk is, but it isn't matched exactly. $10 higher value doesn't have an exact linear increase over somebody who's $10 of value lower. So so we see these kind of yes no decision trees, which become highly complicated and can only work with machine learning in multiple millions of runs. And then we see the guys over at MIT working on a whole new predictive modeling technique, which almost requires new systems. Thank God for cloud technology as well, because they keep up with the new systems and they keep up with the new functions that you can use in the machine. So we're pretty excited about the analytical technology. On the consumer side, there's always been, and this is true of auto insurance as well, a gap between how much money you save in the time you have the customer and how much it costs to do loss prevention. We know what homes will now withstand storms like you've seen in Louisiana, right? You see the pictures of the one home that's still standing with no neighbors, and you say, well, why don't we, pay for that for everybody? And the answer is because one policy can't pay. A lifetime of policies won't pay for the new roof and the cinder block and the elevation and all that sort of stuff. So that's always been a problem. And IoT is getting closer to serving that market, because it's solving the problem by integrating the elements of their technology in the house rather than having to be added on and maintained and turned on and make sure it's connected with the web and so forth. So it's getting closer. But today the most valuable thing I can do is put a water leakage stop valve on somebody's main line, and I'll save 2 to 4% of my premiums. And over a 5-year period, I might have enough money to pay for that to be done. But so there's always been that little problem with in-world tech. So you can reward the customer's investment in it with a lower rate, but you won't necessarily pay for the tech. And that's always been a leap. So we do spend a lot of time offering services and facilities for people to be able to do loss mitigation on their own. Turns out you really should attach some sort of other short-term consumer benefit to that technology, so that they have more of an appreciation for the usage of the device. So it's really useful to be able to see whether your water is leaking while you're on vacation, whether your thermostat's turned down while you're not in the house, whether the dog got out of the door and never came back, whether somebody entered your door and you didn't invite them. And, so some of this new technology that keeps you managing your house day to day, if you can integrate loss mitigation with that, it becomes of current value rather than future. And so we're trying to tie up with people who are heavily involved with that. The connector technology is the one I'm most excited about, which is right now, anybody who has an address, forget about the insurance world, just dump the insurance shopping world. Anybody who has an address, I can present my rate. So my goal is to have 1 million more quotes just to get 1,000 more customers. I'm okay with that because I'm trying to get to a zero cost per quote. That drives everybody who wants to sell you something transactionally crazy. That means when the aerial imagery guys parse their data and say, here is what it is for that particular home, I say, okay, I need it for the other 17 million homes in my footprint. And their mind explodes because they're used to transactional pricing, not whole database pricing. And they'll think you're going to go do something with it that'll be evil and nefarious. And
competitive to them. They're worried about you competing against them with their own data too.
They do, and we don't. We just sign away our life on that. But it's way. And I say to them, hey, I'm going to pay you more per policy than you're going to get from these other companies. So dump the transactional idea, because you're becoming a pre-underwriter with me, and I'm paying you to do that. So the trade's not bad. It's just not where the data industry is at. But being able to present my rate in non-insurance situations is worth it, because then you're not just considering a company because they have a funny animal on TV or kind of a chuckle of a commercial. You're doing it because you remember this rate, and you forgot what your home insurance rate is. You go home and look at it someday, or it comes across on a bill, and you say, "Oh, I remember that Plymouth Rock only costs $1,200. I got to go over there." And so that's better consideration than any other type of consideration.
Awesome.
That's what I'm excited about. We zero cost per quote, get your rate everywhere. We're not 100% of the way there. We give up rating variables that other people use against us, but we're becoming better at predicting when that's happening.
Yeah, I think when you look at the InsureTech market, of course, we've been interviewing a lot of InsureTechs for the last two years on this show. When you try and define like what an InsureTech is, and distinguishing an InsureTech from a modern and mainline insurance company is becoming increasingly difficult, because everybody's racing towards like what does it look like for the end consumer, right? Like for the end consumer, it's instant quoting, right? Like give me your address, answer less than 5 questions, and give me a price. No more. Okay, you have to submit it and then have someone review it and then get a price back to you. So that's like one hallmark. And by the way, of course, that's being applied, and through this show, we've seen it being applied to a ton of lines, both personal and commercial lines, property, even driving into areas like comp and other areas that are typically extremely laborious to quote out. Streamlining quoting is always a hallmark that I've seen of an InsureTech.
Yeah, but these guys who do it, they don't give themselves credit. They don't charge enough. I look at my loss ratios and my growth rate and compare it with anybody who's doing this process, and you have to say, where is their tech? It's still being developed. They haven't got the algorithms to support what they're doing. I'm pretty excited because we're beating the industry's loss ratios, and we're certainly beating growth rates.
Well, there is I would speculate that there is a good bit of, and I only say this because I'm not privy to their internal financials, but I would speculate there's a good bit of usage of venture capital and private equity funds to subsidize rates by going out with a lower price point that's subsidized by investment money. And
could be right, but I think the irony there is they end up with mostly coastal or high cat business. So there's just a lot more to distribution than just getting to a price. So to your point, that I don't think it's enough. I think that advantage of being quoting and even doing it profitably is a closing window, because everybody's figuring out the data and algorithm technology. Now we're entering what I'll call the post-pricing world, where auto really needs to get to. And that is where people buy you for a reason other than price. And that's where it gets exciting, is you need to invent services and products that make it more than a rare event, but a common service to the customer to be doing business with your company.
Yeah. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. Like, it can't just be about streamlining quoting, because I'm seeing everybody doing that. Yeah. And then it can't just be about streamlining claims, because I'm seeing everybody do that too. Like, you're seeing much faster claim payments, much easier claim filing processes, mobile apps, robotic texting. I mean, there's a lot of things that are rolling out across the main. So I think it's going to be, I personally think in the next year, it's going to be increasingly difficult to distinguish the InsureTechs from the mainline insurance companies. The mainline insurance companies both do sponsored startups, like what you have talked about, and just new divisions inside, new brands inside their own company, where they break their existing model with something they own and fully control, because they know what they have to do to compete against folks who come in and cannibalize their business. And there's certainly been a lot of discussion, a lot of hallways that I've heard when they look at like Lemonade's IPO and the valuation and the IPO price, and they look at their loss ratio and they go, where's the, how is that justified? How do I get to that justification? What do I have to do? What brand do I have to roll out, or what product does roll out to get to that justification, so I can get that value on the public market? And so it's been an interesting year to listen to those conversations.
Well, I think I mentioned distribution as a missing element. At least distribution where you've earned an honorable spot. They're not giving you the stuff they can't get through anywhere else. They're actually giving you their quality business. There's also this idea of a culture. So let's go all the way back to Progressive. Progressive has constantly pushed authority down and enabled creativity in an environment that is willing to take risks by completely changing the way other people do insurance. Every year they're coming up with their own innovation. And if you can create that culture and the discipline, let's face it, when they were over in 96, they were back there within 2 months. That is a culture of innovation, experimentation, risk taking, and a discipline of not doing it at a cost to their investors. They're delivering for their investors. And so today their stock price is up $10 over a week ago because the investors realize, you know what, they're so good at self-correcting. They're so disciplined. They have created the perfect culture, the one where you get both the innovation and the profit. And that is something that is a real achievement. And when your insurtechs achieve that, when they can walk and chew gum at the same time, then they deserve to be vaulted to the 5 billion valuation, in spite of what NASDAQ says.
Absolutely. All right, Rob.
So, Bill, you also kind of mentioned, right, that zero cost quote, and I think you touched on this earlier, but definitely want to have you talk a little bit about credit scoring and for it sounds like you're foregoing credit scoring, whereas most of your competitors are highly reliant because it's highly predictable, but it's an expensive piece. And I'll tie that just kind of to broadly, right, your vision for the future. So you've already talked to us about several innovations that you've made at Plymouth Rock Assurance in the homeowner space, but what's to come, or what's your view of what this the future of the homeowners insurance market should look like?
So I haven't solved the problem. I haven't figured out a way to completely eliminate the lift in credit scoring. It always seems to add lift no matter what proxy I'm using. But credit itself is a proxy. And that means that there has to be other proxies for it. If it's a proxy for driving behavior, actually measuring driving behavior should replace credit. So that's good news. But we don't have the similarity. We might with some of the insurance of things and home insurance. But the idea is if you can get rid of the proxy and get to the risk, your customers feel a lot better about what they're paying. There's a bunch of movement to pass laws to restrict underwriting rules. The ones they shouldn't restrict are the ones that actually tie right directly to risk. If you buy a dog that's bitten somebody in the past, you probably should pay more than somebody who has a dog that's never bitten anybody in the past. So risk-based rating is something our customers are willing to take. They don't like the proxies. And if it's a proxy, I postulate to you that there's enough data out there. I'm almost certain the data will give me a way to recreate credit without credit. It's, for lack of a better term, it's not really a proxy, but it's measuring the risk directly rather than indirectly, right? Not everybody who misses a credit card bill is going to run a red light or let their fireplace go while they leave. So figuring out what the behavior is always going to be better than figuring out what the proxy for that behavior is. So that's our obsession, but I haven't gotten rid of it entirely. I do use it in a couple of states, and I experiment with different levels of use in other states. But in our world, it is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So if somebody comes to the conclusion, we can't because we don't collect this data, but if somebody comes to the conclusion that this is somehow discriminatory and they want to get rid of it, we're ahead of the game.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I love that, Bill.
It's
Rob,
Sorry,
it's
James.
an analytical challenge. It's kind of like one of those guys who gets on a plane and tries to figure out math problems, and that Einstein never figured out. We kind of try to figure out how to kill credit.
I love that, Bill, because it's something that I know I've been preaching for a long time about. This proxy variables that the insurance industry has relied on for decades, really, if not centuries, right? But yet, taking it to the auto space as you did, right? If I have your telematics data, I know everything about your vehicle, I know everything about your driving, and I've even got information about the roadways themselves and which ones are safe and which ones are dangerous. Then what relevance is your age, gender, marital status, right, to pricing your auto insurance? It shouldn't become relevant anymore because I have all the variables that I need, and that might be collected through sensors, right? And that might be data that was never feasible before, never actionable before, and I was forced to use these proxies. But as I can get closer to quote unquote directly observing your behavior as a homeowner, your home's behavior, as people don't think of their home as a system, but it is a system, and it's really a system of systems, right? Like your plumbing system, your electrical system, and
Yep.
things like that. And so the more I can learn about the behaviors of those systems and your actions as a homeowner, I don't need to worry about, well, how many stories do you have, or what's the age of your home, or when did you replace the roof last, and things like that. That, to your point, most people don't know the square footage of their home. They don't know how old their roof is.
That's right. They certainly don't know how much it costs to replace it, and yet they know that they'll save money if they underestimate it.
Yeah, the other thing, I mean, certainly in technology, and I've been writing software for a very, very long time, and we're looking at reporting out of our systems. We've always looked for causality, not just correlation. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of the equity arguments around the use of credit. Is that it may be correlated, but is it real? Is there really causality there, and is it fair?
Yeah, I
Uh,
had the same issue with the channel discounts, right? People say, well, you need to have a separate rating plan for direct versus independent agents. And I always say, yeah, but I don't go up to a stoplight and say, because I'm direct, I'm going to go through the red light. And you can stay because you're IA. It doesn't happen. It's not the way it works. So the core, again, the causation is not there. And if you get to the causation, you're going to be way more accurate, to your point. By the way, if you're a coder, you'll like one of the things we do, which is because we have a idea of what we want to charge a risk before we meet them, it takes a lot less code. And simple code is one of the things that is a noose around a lot of difficult code is a noose around a lot of the big companies. Their systems do so much that one little change breaks 100 things and they have to test away and fix, and everything costs $1 million and takes 6 months. If they get to simple code and do it offline, you got a lot of systems vendors out there trying to sell you more code. And I just crack up and go, why don't they say, hey, I'm going to win by charging you less and giving you less code, and you guys can do all this other stuff offline.
yeah, I mean, I've personally been involved in that. Been building claims software for 17 years, and certainly policy management software. And when it takes $500,000 in 6 months just to roll a new line in a new state out, you've got something fundamentally wrong with with the whole system, right?
But nobody's trying to sell you a system that deconstructs that. They're all trying to sell you a system that does more. And I actually want my systems to do less. I want to do more offline. I don't want it to take a lot of effort and testing to change the color of the title on page 8.
Yeah, or to say, hey, I want to add a new state, or hey, I want
Yeah,
to roll a
we
new.
we
Yeah,
use a clone method for that, which is you can do in homeowners more than you can in auto, to be honest. The regulation is so different by state. In auto, you end up with all kinds of nuances,
yeah.
and that
Well,
almost makes automation a waste of time because it's too customized.
yeah, we could have a litany of discussions around our U.S. regulatory environment around insurance and and how bizarre it is to have a country that has 50 regulators, and how
Yeah,
much work it creates. But
and you guys in Europe keep reminding me of that one.
yeah, exactly. But there is I mean, you could make a case for federalized insurance regulation, but at the same time, you could argue that state-based regulation makes the regulatory environment competitive, and some states better than others. And of course, I think you're seeing that around people relocating around the country. It's
It
not.
allows for experimentation, but I would also
Yes.
argue that it tests whether a particular approach to regulation is actually helping the consumer or not.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
only bad part about it is the political football, but the truth is a lot of these regulators are trying to do something good for the consumer, and sometimes just don't know that what they're doing isn't.
Yeah, isn't actually good for them. All right, Rob. Closing questions or thoughts?
No, I'm just I love what you're doing, Bill. Just the experience that you have, your view on the industry, the innovative spirit that you have, and yet you're actually driving true change, not just hype, as we were kind of talking a little bit before the call. So having that accountability, right, of actually having to manage your loss ratio, your combined ratio, and like we were kind of joking on the podcast, right? It shouldn't be piling up losses. The higher the valuation, right?
I
That
think
should be
I think
holding
what the
you
investors
accountable to
don't
what you're
know is
doing.
that is I think what the investors don't know is that anybody can grow in this business. It isn't hard to grow. You just lower your rates more. So, from our standpoint, we're having fun because we're trying to figure out ways that we can pull off both. It's the same sort of fun we had 37 years ago with Progressive. We know that you can do it both ways if you really put good minds to it, and we have great talent, having a lot of fun, and that's a requirement for me. I wouldn't be in this business if I wasn't having fun.
Yeah, awesome, great. Well, thanks. Appreciate the conversation. It's always good to talk to a new friend in insurance, and then, of course, if you want more information on Plymouth Rock, it's pretty simple. PlymouthRock.com is their website. and you can find out more about the company and their leader, Bill Martin, there. Now, Rob, I know you have a couple of news stories to close out the year, being it's our last show of the year. What do you have?
I do. So I've got one news story and two self promotions that I'll mask as news. But the news item I have this week is from a company called Farmers Edge. They're actually a Canadian company, and they started by creating software as a service to farmers to basically manage their operations. It has a bunch of information about their fields, their crops, and allows them to manage their business. They previously have had relationships with insurance entities, Munich Re and Fairfax, but they announced recently that they're actually starting their own insurance MGA called Digit Ag Risk Management. And what I love about this one is that they're going to use the access that they already have to proprietary field-centric data sets that come from farms, including satellite imagery, on-farm weather events, predictive crop models, acreage reports, and more. And they're going to take all those data sets that they already have and helping farmers manage their operations to create new insurance solutions and risk transfer opportunities, including parametric, that have previously been unavailable to the marketplace. And not only are they going to be offering these really individualized insurance products and parametric solutions to farmers, but they're tying that with group benefits. So they're going to allow farmers to also offer group insurance benefits to their employees, like dental, vision, and medical coverage for both full-time and seasonal employees. So I just love that they've became a public company this year. They raised $99 million in their Canadian IPO. And so this is a great example of a firm that we talk about quite a bit in the industry, but often don't struggle to come up with actual use cases of a company that's outside the insurance business, that has a platform that has a bunch of data that then kind of overnight moves into the insurance space, and it was potentially somebody that's cooperating before that's now become a non-traditional competitor with other agricultural crop insurers in Canada. And certainly, obviously, you could see them expanding to the US and elsewhere pretty easily.
Awesome.
So the self promotions I have, I earlier this week I was on the year end webinar from InsureTech Insights, and this is a fun webinar. They always have great content, but the year end one is always a special one where we like to have a little bit of fun. And we talk about the year that occurred in InsureTech, and this theme was 2021, the year InsureTech exploded. We also pull out our crystal balls for 2022. We actually had several forbidden words that we couldn't say as kind of a gamification. So disruption was one, unicorn was another. So anyway, I've got a link out there. I encourage folks to watch the replay. You do have to register to watch the replay, but it's highly worth your time and entertaining. And then finally, a special thanks to Mike Fidel from InsureTech Ohio, who was kind enough to feature me in their Spotlight series. So just kind of talking with Mike, a great conversation that we had about InsureTech. Again, very similar theme of where we've been and where it's going. So Jeff, definitely check out my interview with Mike Fidel of InsureTech Ohio.
Awesome. And I've got a couple of news stories that I thought were interesting. This is SPAC deals. And SPACs are. I've got some pretty strong feelings about SPACs that I'll just keep out of this. It's a nice backdoor way to go public. But InsureTech LeakBot is going public in a SPAC deal. It's a UK InsureTech called LeakBot under the name Ondo InsureTech in a SPAC deal with Spinnaker Acquisitions from the UK Tech News reported on this. It's an IoT device. They created a device to help protect homes from water damage and save water and decrease building material waste, trying to reduce claim costs and payouts there. So they are going public. But again, you mentioned the record year for InsureTech funding, and this is from fintechnews.sg. That 2021 was a record year for InsureTech funding. As of Q3 2021, more than 10.5 billion had been raised by companies in the space year to date, and nearly 48. This is crazy, surpassing 2020's total of 7 billion. So it was a huge passing of 2020's funding. That's from Willis Towers Watson data. So there was a massive uptick. Some of the largest fundraisers was ACO in India, ACKO, $255 million raised over there. Bolt Tech, and this is talking about all the Asia Pacific. We don't really cover the Asia Pacific region, but they're raising a lot of money for InsureTech. And then coming over here, Bolt Tech raised $210 million. Digit Insurance raised $200 million. Yongbao, $156 million. InsureTech, $127 million. Carrot raised $88 million. I mean, it goes all over the place. Of course, Australia, we talked about Cover Genius, $72.8 million. So there's a lot of these firms that raised an incredible amount of capital, but it was a record fundraising year, which of course draws a lot of attention, brings additional investors, and of course draws the eye of many mainline insurance companies who are trying to compete there. So very interesting year there. Bill, your speculation? Are we gonna pass that $10.5 billion mark in 2022?
I think I'm more concerned with who it goes to than how much. So I'm betting it begins to be redirected to somebody who might actually give them something back.
Yeah. Truer words cannot have been spoken better. Now, mind you, Bill, I am a hardcore bootstrapped entrepreneur, so I've spent 20 years bootstrapping my own tech companies and selling them. Have not raised capital, so I have this maniacal focus on profitability because I had to survive from starting this business with $5,000 in my dorm room. So I am on the same page with you on this.
I'll admit to you, my most profitable venture so far was the bootstrap one. So I'm a personal profit, not necessarily a success for the owner.
Yeah, but personal profit. I mean, it's the way it is. I mean, bootstrapping drives a pretty intense mindset, and certainly focuses your mind when you don't have millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars sitting in the background, and the desire to go IPO and then to exit your shares before you have to prove you can actually make money. I mean, that's, there are a lot of companies that their business plan is raise, exit, or raise, IPO, and exit our shares before we have to prove it can actually become profitable.
I can tell you, I eat a lot differently since the business got going too. It really helps a lot to fill the fridge sometimes. So we once called Neptune Project Healthcare.
Yeah, you're trying to get health insurance.
Yeah, we were buying insurance. We couldn't afford it, but we bought it.
I don't think I could afford health insurance until my 6th or 7th year in business is when I finally got a health insurance plan for myself.
You were playing chicken there. That was good.
Yeah, well, when they say entrepreneurs put it all on the line, sometimes you literally put all of it on the line. It's do I have enough food for groceries? There's definitely not enough food for health insurance, and can I pay payroll? I mean, that's the way that it works.
I remember it romantically. I don't remember it hungrily.
I don't remember it hungrily either. I remember it romantically as well. It's been an interesting ride. Well, thank you, Bill, for being our final guest of the year. I really appreciate it, and you're a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you.
Great to talk to you guys.
And
a lot of fun.
And Rob, it's been a lot of fun doing this with you this year. So thanks for all the wonderful episodes, and thanks for being a friend.
Yeah, likewise, James. It's always a blast. And just a reminder to our listeners, we did have a conversation with Jim Albert from Neptune. So that's in the podcast library. So check that out. And something you can do in your downtime over the holidays is catch up on older episodes of the InsureTech Geek podcast.
Nice. That's awesome.
Looking forward to 2022, James.
Yeah, same here. Can't wait. My book will finally be out. Oh, it's done with editing. So it's called The Bootstrapped Entrepreneur. It's all about how to apply a bootstrap mentality to any business, even if you're funded. And so I took all my lessons learned from 20 years and talked about it. So didn't want to write a book on InsureTech because there's this other guy I know that wrote a really good book on InsureTech that I already recommend to people called The End of Insurance as we know it. So really, really great. If you want to read that, go to endofinsurance.com. Again, this has been the InsureTech Geek podcast powered by JB Knowledge, jbknowledge.com. It's all about tech that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. I've been your host, James Benham, jamesbenham.com, with co-host Rob Galbraith, endofinsurance.com. Big thanks to Jim Greenlee, our podcast producer, and Kara Dalton-Aro, our creative producer. And thank you for joining us. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech. So enjoy the ride and geek out. See you next year.